The night sky was unnaturally quiet, the kind of quiet that felt alive. Deep within a remote observatory, draped in the shadow of distant mountains, Dr. Elena Marquez adjusted the receiver, her fingers trembling slightly with anticipation. For months, her team had been scanning the depths of the cosmos, listening for anomalies, for whispers of intelligence beyond the void. They weren't expecting much. But tonight, the machine hummed differently, almost impatiently, as if the universe itself had shifted to pay attention. The signal came as a faint, oscillating pulse at first, almost indistinguishable from the cosmic background noise. But as Elena filtered through the layers of interference, patterns emerged, strange, deliberate, almost musical. It wasn't like anything humanity had created. Each sequence seemed to echo with precision, an intelligence far beyond the comprehension of Earth's technology. Her pulse quickened, the entire team leaned closer, mesmerized. The message, or perhaps it was not a message at all, was untranslatable. No language, no mathematical signature, nothing that matched human logic. Yet, there was a rhythm, a cadence that suggested purpose. Somewhere, out there, something had reached across light years, and yet, as Elena traced the trajectory, a chill settled in her chest. The signal didn't originate from a star system capable of hosting life. It came from the empty void between galaxies, from a place humanity wasn't meant to reach, and then, suddenly, it stopped. The screens flickered. The equipment returned to static, as if nothing had happened. Yet, the echo of the signal lingered in Elena's mind, a haunting resonance that refused to fade. She whispered to herself, "Why now? Why us?" There was a strange clarity in that silence, a warning hidden in beauty. And somewhere deep in the cosmos, the truth waited, patient and indifferent, that this signal was never intended for human ears. By morning, the world had not yet known. Elena's team had agreed, silently, to verify the signal before going public. But the news had a way of leaking. Within hours, amateur astronomers and radio enthusiasts across the globe reported strange anomalies in their own receivers. The whispers of a cosmic signal began to spread through online forums, jumping from niche science communities into mainstream news outlets. Headlines ran with cautious speculation: mysterious signal from deep space, possible message from the unknown. Governments became alert, military satellites pivoted, and intelligence agencies began asking questions that had no answers. At first, the signal seemed harmless, just a curious anomaly in the electromagnetic spectrum. But as more data poured in, scientists noticed a pattern that sent shivers down the spine: the signal repeated at precise intervals, across multiple frequencies, and each repetition seemed to encode layers of information far beyond conventional decoding. It was like looking at an alien painting that defied perspective, one that the human mind could recognize only in fragments. Elena watched as her quiet observatory transformed into a hub of global attention. Delegations arrived, emails poured in, and the weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders. It wasn't just a discovery, it was a challenge. Yet, the more she tried to interpret the signal, the more she realized that understanding it was impossible with Earth's technology. The structure of the pulses suggested a mind that thought in dimensions humans could not perceive. It wasn't communication in the way humans understood, it was something else, something indifferent to their existence. Then, the first anomaly occurred. Instruments around the world, supposedly shielded, began registering energy spikes. Strange, non-threatening, yet undeniably unnatural phenomena appeared. Satellites recorded unusual disturbances, deep space probes experienced minor malfunctions, and power grids in remote regions flickered as if acknowledging a presence. Panic began to stir among the public, fueled by speculation and fear of the unknown. Governments issued statements to calm the masses, but no statement could mask the unease growing in the hearts of those who sensed that something far greater than humanity's comprehension had reached out. Elena felt it most acutely at night. The sky, once familiar and comforting, now felt vast, cold, and watchful. The signal's echo haunted her dreams, as if inviting her to step closer to a cosmic truth that humans were never meant to touch. And deep down, she understood that this was not a call for friendship or warning, it was a signal that simply existed, indifferent to Earth, brushing past humanity as though they were nothing more than an accidental witness to the universe's hidden machinery. The temptation to respond was irresistible. Humanity had always sought to reach beyond itself, to prove its presence in the cosmos. By now, the signal had been carefully mapped, analyzed, and catalogued. Yet understanding it remained impossible. Still, world agencies debated sending a reply, a human attempt to claim recognition from something far beyond their comprehension. Elon-like private ventures, space agencies, and a coalition of scientists began designing transmissions, structured in binary, mathematics, music, anything that might make sense to an intelligence so alien. Elena watched this with unease. The signal had never seemed deliberate toward humans, yet the global reaction assumed intentionality. Wasn't that arrogance, she wondered, to interpret the universe's indifference as a conversation? Yet, despite her reservations, she participated. Her team crafted a transmission composed of prime numbers, the universal constant of physics, and a simple illustration of DNA. It would be sent from a deep space antenna far from Earth's noise, a cautious olive branch to the unknown. The moment the transmission left Earth, the skies themselves seemed to react. Across continents, people reported faint, almost imperceptible tremors, an oscillation in the atmosphere, so subtle it could have been imagined. Satellites detected a change in the cosmic background, something akin to a ripple in the void. It was as though the universe had paused, acknowledging that humanity had finally replied. But reply to whom, or what? That question haunted every mind that had dared send a signal. Then, the anomalies grew. Electrical systems in isolated regions began to behave strangely, lights flickered in complex patterns, communication signals overlapped with strange harmonics, and strange, fleeting shapes appeared in long-exposure images of the night sky. They were not spaceships, not signals from known celestial bodies, but patterns of geometry that didn't belong to Earth. People began to call it the echo of the signal, a phenomenon no one could explain. Elena realized something terrifying: the signal had never been intended for Earth, yet it had noticed them. And by responding, humanity had invited an interaction it could neither comprehend nor control. The universe was indifferent, but indifferent entities could be unpredictable. Somewhere, in the vast void, the original sender, or perhaps the machinery of its signal, was shifting, responding in a way that was beyond comprehension. And humanity, small, fragile, and utterly unprepared, had stepped into a game whose rules they would never understand. By now, the signal's presence was undeniable. It no longer remained a distant whisper, it had seeped into Earth's reality, bending the familiar in subtle yet unrelenting ways. Reports flooded in from around the world, navigational instruments failing inexplicably, migratory patterns of birds and whales disrupted, and even simple compasses spinning without cause. Weather patterns began exhibiting strange anomalies, localized storms forming and dissipating with uncanny precision. As if guided by a force beyond comprehension, Elena spent her days in the observatory, monitoring every fluctuation. She noticed a strange resonance in the signal's pulse that seemed to echo in Earth's magnetic field, almost like a heartbeat. It wasn't alive in the human sense, but it left traces of intent, like footprints in the sand of the cosmos. Some nights, she swore she could hear it, a soft, almost musical vibration beneath the hum of her equipment. A sound that shouldn't exist on Earth, yet it persisted. Around the world, the psychological effects became apparent. People reported visions, dreams that felt more like memories from another reality. Artists sketched shapes they had never seen. Mathematicians discovered patterns that defied logic, and children began describing places that didn't exist on any map. Governments dismissed some of these phenomena as mass hysteria, but scientists on the front lines knew better. The signal was interacting with consciousness itself. Then came the first physical manifestations. In remote areas, small objects began to move without explanation, rocks shifting in precise formations, tools rearranging themselves, delicate instruments aligning to patterns no one had designed. It was subtle, almost playful, but impossible to ignore. A realization sank into Elena's mind: humanity had become part of the signal's environment. By responding, they had invited a presence that didn't just observe but subtly influenced the world around them, and yet, amid the chaos, the signal remained cryptic. It never communicated directly, never acknowledged Earth in a way that humans could fully perceive. It was a presence, a force, a set of instructions in a cosmic language no human could fluently read. And that was the most terrifying truth of all: the universe had reached out, indifferent to humanity's existence, and yet, by chance, humanity had touched something that was never meant to notice them. Elena sat alone one night, staring at the flickering lights of her equipment, understanding at last that the signal was not a call to arms, a greeting, or even a warning. It was something else entirely, an echo of the universe itself, a cosmic rhythm that existed beyond the confines of life, space, or time. And humans had unknowingly inserted themselves into that rhythm, vulnerable to a force they could never hope to fully understand or control. The changes began subtly, almost imperceptibly at first, but soon became impossible to ignore. Across the globe, scientists documented phenomena that defied every law they had understood. Satellites captured auroras that pulsed with impossible geometries, trees and plants appeared to align in intricate, fractal patterns, and tectonic activity, while normal in appearance, followed rhythms that matched the signal's pulse. Humanity was no longer merely observing the signal, it was being subtly rewritten by it. Elena noticed it in her own lab. Instruments that should have been purely mechanical displayed behaviors that suggested a hidden intelligence. Oscilloscopes traced patterns that weren't programmed, radio arrays captured sequences that seemed to anticipate the operator's thoughts, and even the most sophisticated AI models began producing outputs that were eerily prescient. It was as if the signal had infused itself into Earth's systems, rewriting rules of physics, consciousness, and technology at scales no one could yet comprehend. Public reaction shifted from fascination to unease. People whispered of the invisible hand guiding the planet, of unseen forces subtly reshaping life and reality. Religious sects declared the signal a divine phenomenon, while scientists struggled to maintain reason in the face of phenomena that laughed at logic. Panic simmered in the background, restrained only by the absence of overt threat. Humanity understood that something profound was happening, but the nature of the change remained maddeningly elusive, and then came the anomalies in perception. Individuals reported hearing harmonics embedded in everyday noise, as if the world itself were vibrating with a hidden message. Dreams became increasingly vivid, sometimes indistinguishable from reality. Children spoke of places between stars and machines that think in light, describing them with such precision it unsettled even the most skeptical researchers. It was as if consciousness itself had become attuned to the signal, a side effect that no one had anticipated. Elena began to fear that humanity's very perception of reality was no longer entirely its own. The signal, never meant for Earth, had found a way to seep into minds and machines alike. It didn't care, didn't intend harm, but its presence had consequences nonetheless. The universe, in all its vastness, had reached past the limits of comprehension and touched life in ways humans could not fully predict. And somewhere, deep in the cosmic void from which the signal had originated, the source, cold, vast, and indifferent, continued its silent watch, oblivious to the lives it had altered merely by existing. By now, the signal's influence had grown impossible to ignore. Entire cities reported phenomena that science could neither predict nor explain. Electrical grids hummed with frequencies that had no earthly origin, screens displayed shifting patterns that seemed to anticipate human thought, and streetlights pulsed in rhythms matching the distant cosmic pulse. It was as though the planet itself had become a resonator for something beyond comprehension. Elena noticed a more personal change. Her own thoughts occasionally felt interrupted, as if some external rhythm nudged her mind in subtle ways. At first, she dismissed it as stress, the strain of global attention and sleepless nights. But as the days passed, she realized that she could feel the signal's pulse, not just in her instruments, but in her very consciousness. It was disorienting, unsettling, and yet hypnotically compelling. She began recording patterns in her dreams, visions of geometries and landscapes that defied Euclidean logic, cities floating in impossible formations, machinery that moved as though alive, all pulsing in sync with the faint hum she now perceived in her mind even when she closed her eyes. Governments attempted containment. Space agencies recalibrated satellites, astronomers reoriented arrays, and military forces monitored potential threats. Yet, nothing they did disrupted the signal. In fact, every human attempt to interfere seemed to amplify subtle effects. Instruments aligned themselves, messages appeared in intercepted communications, and artificial intelligence began to generate patterns and predictions that mirrored the alien pulse. Humanity was discovering, slowly and painfully, that the signal was rewriting the rules, not out of malice, but simply by existing. Communities began reporting signal events. Objects moved with no cause, water shimmered with inexplicable light, and people experienced moments of shared perception, seeing things collectively that defied individual explanation. Some experienced terror, others awe. Cults formed around these experiences, interpreting them as divine or supernatural, while rational minds struggled to reconcile what they saw with what they knew. The boundary between human perception and the signal's influence blurred. Elena, however, remained focused on one haunting truth: this signal had never been meant for Earth. It did not respond to human messages in a conventional sense, nor did it acknowledge our existence in any communicative way. Yet, by interacting with it, humanity had become entwined with a force indifferent, vast, and profoundly intelligent, a force that could not be bargained with, reasoned with, or fully understood. And as she gazed at the night sky, she knew, with chilling clarity, that the cosmos had nudged a single species into its machinery, not as participants, but as incidental witnesses to a universe that would continue its eternal rhythm, regardless of human comprehension or survival. The world had changed irreversibly. By now, the signal was no longer just a phenomenon to observe, it was a force that shaped reality itself. Entire regions reported anomalies that defied natural explanation. Rivers altered their courses overnight in geometrically precise patterns, forests grew in fractal arrangements that repeated across continents, and the auroras shifted, forming intricate lattices visible even in daylight. Humanity was witnessing the subtle artistry of an intelligence that had never intended to communicate with them, yet left undeniable traces of its existence everywhere. Elena's own work became a daily struggle against incomprehension. Her instruments, once tools, were now mediums for a presence that operated on a scale she could not contain. Patterns appeared in data that seemed to encode instructions, or perhaps warnings, written in a language no human could decode. The closer she examined them, the more she felt her mind stretching, as if the signal were subtly tuning her perception to dimensions and concepts beyond ordinary comprehension. She saw shapes in the night sky that were impossible, yet undeniable, as though the universe itself had opened a window that humans were never meant to look through. Society was fracturing. Those who could sense the signal directly experienced hallucinations, visions, or moments of profound understanding, while others remained oblivious, creating tension and fear. Attempts to harness the signal's energy for technology or power resulted in disasters. Machines malfunctioned, cities experienced unexplainable outages, and in some places, the environment itself seemed to resist human intervention. Scientists coined a term, the resonance effect. It described how the signal subtly aligned matter, energy, and consciousness across the globe in ways that humans could neither predict nor resist. Religious, philosophical, and scientific communities all struggled to interpret what was happening. Some claimed humanity had touched divinity, others warned of an imminent cosmic judgment, while the majority simply stood in awe at forces they could not fathom. Elena realized with a grim clarity, the signal was not alive in any sense humans understood, but it had an effect as profound as life itself. Its presence was shaping existence, and humanity's role was incidental, a byproduct of proximity, not a chosen participant in a cosmic conversation. And then came the first irreversible events. Instruments recorded bursts of energy that reshaped local landscapes. Communications grids briefly transmitted unknown, self-replicating sequences. In remote areas, those who experienced intense contact with the signal reported permanent changes in perception, as if their minds had been tuned to the pulse of the universe itself. Humanity had crossed a threshold. By responding to the signal, they had become entwined with a force that would continue to operate, indifferent and eternal, long after human understanding, or even humanity itself, had faded. Elena stared at the night sky, the stars now seeming less like distant points of light and more like components of a vast, unseen architecture. The signal had arrived, and humanity had answered. But the answer had been irrelevant. The universe continued its rhythm. Indifferent to human comprehension, yet leaving traces of its inexorable logic imprinted on a species that had never been meant to hear it, time itself seemed to bend under the signal's influence. Decades passed, though in some regions it felt like hours. Patterns of light and energy pulsed across the earth with a rhythm that no human clock could measure. Humanity had adapted, in part, to the subtle changes. Cities reorganized themselves around inexplicable phenomena, technologies evolved to accommodate the signal's unpredictable patterns, and individuals who could perceive its resonance became guides, prophets, or scientists in a new kind of discipline that combined intuition with observation. Elena, now older and weathered by decades of study, stood atop a quiet hill overlooking a transformed landscape. The forests below shimmered with patterns that matched sequences she had once observed in the original signal. Rivers flowed in loops and fractals, mountains seemed subtly aligned along invisible grids, and the night sky displayed shifting constellations in precise, alien geometries. Humanity had survived, adapted, and learned to coexist with a force it could never hope to fully understand, but the truth remained immutable: the signal had never been meant for Earth. Every pulse, every resonance, was indifferent to human presence. Humanity had been a bystander, an incidental observer. Perhaps even a small instrument in a process that spanned the universe. For all their ingenuity, curiosity, and technology, humans had only scratched the surface of a cosmic design that did not bend to their comprehension. Elena realized the most haunting truth: the universe was vast, indifferent, and eternally patient. It did not reach out to communicate with life, it simply existed, and occasionally, a fragment of its infinite rhythm brushed against the consciousness of a fragile species. And when it did, the consequences were profound, not because of intent, but because even the smallest touch of something so vast could reshape the world entirely. She closed her eyes and listened. The signal pulsed faintly, a heartbeat in the dark vastness, continuing on its path, as if reminding humanity of its own smallness. And yet, in that hum, there was beauty, terrible and sublime, a reminder that the universe was alive in ways humans could never fully perceive, and that their existence, fleeting as it might be, was now forever entwined with a cosmic rhythm that had never needed them, had never intended to be understood, and yet had changed them irrevocably. Elena smiled faintly, a mix of awe and melancholy. Humanity had glimpsed the infinite and survived, not through understanding, but through the simple, fragile persistence of life. And as the stars pulsed above, the signal faded into the distance. Leaving Earth altered, enlightened, and humbled, a silent witness to a universe that would continue its eternal rhythm, indifferent yet infinitely majestic. Long after humanity had gone, the cosmos had spoken, not to communicate, but to exist. And humanity, for the first and perhaps only time, had listened.